OCO, hello and welcome to our video on reading for the main idea. To begin, let's identify the topic and main idea of this video. The topic is reading for main idea, and the main idea is that there are strategies you can use to help you efficiently and effectively locate the main idea in a text that you are reading. This is important because topic and main idea are very closely related as we consider how to focus on a writer's main idea. Now, having said that, let's define some key terms. Topic. What's a topic? A topic is a subject of a discussion or conversation, a general field of conversation. An idea is a thought, conception, or notion, and a main idea is the most important or most central thought of a paragraph or an entire text. Something that tells the reader what the text is about. So, if you think about it, the main idea is that most important point, most important idea about the general subject or general field of conversation. Now, let's briefly consider some different kinds of text that we might read, because different kinds or different genres of texts will typically structure their main ideas in different ways or put them in different places. For instance, a formal letter, or an email, or a flyer, or an article in the Oregonian or Willamette Week, or an academic essay, or an article in a magazine, or perhaps an assignment sheet that your instructor has given to you. These are all different kinds of texts. So how you, as a reader, might seek out and locate both the topic and the main idea when you read these kinds of texts would be different. And that all depends on how the text itself is structured. Now, some questions that you should ask when trying to consider the main idea of an article or an academic essay. And let's focus specifically on articles and academic essays right now. First, what is the title? And does the title identify the topic? Then, can you locate the topic somewhere in the first paragraph? Then, what are the key terms, specifically nouns and verbs, that help to express this topic? And where do you see these key terms, these key nouns and verbs appearing in the body of the text itself? And also, where can you, as a reader, identify the writer's main idea about this topic within the body of the text? And how can you locate those places, again, by considering the key terms? Now, for the remainder of this video, we're going to focus on reading an article, something that was published a few years ago in the magazine Scientific American. It's called Novel Finding: Reading Literary Fiction Improves Empathy. It's a kind of an article that you might locate by doing a Google search or by searching your college library databases. And it's a kind of text you could definitely cite as a credible source in an academic essay, including the essays that you might write for a class that you're taking. FYI, this text is also being referenced in another video which we've produced here at PCC about writing a summary. So hopefully these two videos can be even more useful when viewed and considered together. Now let's consider three different strategies to read for the main idea in this text. Strategy number one. Focus on the places where you've likely been trained as a student writer to emphasize your own main ideas in an essay. What do I mean? I mean the last sentence of the first paragraph, right, which is where you may have been taught to locate your thesis, or which is often the main idea of an essay, and also the first sentences of each of the body paragraphs, often called topic sentences. To consider then how we can see the main idea of the text coming through in these particular places. So if I were to read this sentence, how important is fiction in socializing school children? Researchers at the New School in New York City have found evidence that literary fiction improves a reader's capacity to understand what others are thinking and feeling. That definitely gives me a pretty strong sense of the main idea of this particular article. And if I go through and I trace the development of this idea from one paragraph to the next by focusing on the first sentence, the topic sentence, I can probably get a good sense of how this is going to develop, how this idea is going to develop. I'm seeing a contrast between literary fiction and popular fiction. I'm also seeing here at the end an important point about socializing and how reading fiction can be valuable in terms of socialization. This is a useful strategy, one you should definitely use, and it may be a strategy that you frequently use to read through textbooks because it can help you glean some information pretty quickly. However, I'm going to encourage you to consider a couple other strategies to build on top of that to delve a little bit more deeper into the concepts within each of the body paragraphs. And to do that, let's consider those key words, in particular nouns and verbs. So let's focus here on nouns and verbs. Literary fiction improves empathy that we see in the title. If I go through and I look to consider how these key words show up in each of the paragraphs, I'm going to see them in that last sentence of the first paragraph, but I'm also going to see them appearing in some really important places elsewhere in the body paragraphs, places that I might not notice if I'm skimming through the article too quickly and focusing just on the topic sentences. For instance, this significant difference between literary fiction and genre fiction. The specific example of Louise Erdrich's The Roundhouse. The point that it stands to reason that popular fiction or genre fiction does not expand the capacity to empathize. This is an important point which the article makes. I might not have noticed that if I didn't read through the entire paragraph and focus on these key terms. Here I can see these ideas appearing in the topic sentence. Literary fiction focuses on the characters and their relationships. That's an important concept. However, I can also see this idea developing more as I get a little further into the paragraph. And this relates to disrupting expectations and challenging stereotypes and encouraging me as a reader to delve more into the psychology of the characters. I'm also going to see some really important ideas in the conclusion that I might not have noticed if I just skimmed through the topic sentences for each paragraph. So by applying this strategy, considering how the key terms in the title appear in the body paragraphs, I'm starting to get a better sense, a more focused sense of the main idea of the article. One more strategy, strategy number 3, is to examine the subjects and verbs of each sentence. In particular, active verbs that really help me to see motion, to follow a flow of motion throughout a sentence, and help me to see who is doing what. I won't lead you through every sentence in the article to see what this looks like, but I will put my nouns in blue, I'll put my verbs in red, and I'll put my objects in green. And I'm going to go through and trace these ideas throughout the article. I'm going to see that yet again, that last sentence of the first paragraph stands out as a really important place to see a flow of ideas, but I'm also going to see some really important concepts show up, like here, about the participants taking the test, what the researchers found. Right? What did the test results indicate? How did the characters in literary fiction disrupt stereotypes? I can follow these concepts, and they're very important concepts for the article overall. I can follow these concepts from sentence to sentence by focusing on the verbs and the nouns in these sentences. Now, after using these strategies, do we have a better sense of the main idea of this article? I'd like to think so. And as a reader, I might put the main idea of this article like this. A recent psychological study shows that reading literary fiction is more effective for helping readers empathize with and relate to others than reading nonfiction or genre fiction does. Now, remember, the main idea of a text may be something that you disagree with. And personally, I'm not convinced by this article, because even after reading about this study, I still think that nonfiction and genre fiction can both do wonders for boosting empathy in readers. I'm also curious about the example of Louise Erdrich's book, The Roundhouse, which is a phenomenal book. And maybe the reason it boosts empathy isn't just because it's literary fiction. Maybe it's something to do with that particular book. Now, that's fine. We don't need to always agree with the writers. In fact, we often want to question and challenge the things that we read. You do, however, need an accurate understanding of a text in order to express how and why you disagree with the writer. Going forward, You can empower yourself as a reader with some specific strategies for reading actively to determine the topic and main idea of a text. You can read with intention. Don't just skim for information. Rather, think about how that information has been structured in order to present a main idea to you as a reader. And one more good strategy to consider: talking with others. The more you share and discuss your thoughts about the topic and main idea of a text that you've read with other readers, the more that you'll be able to either confirm your own understanding and/or challenge your understanding and arrive at a better one. So keep reading, read actively and intentionally for the main idea, and share your thoughts with other folks who have read the same text. I hope this has been useful. Good thoughts and good luck. Wado.